You are listening to We Saw the Devil, an investigative and conversational true crime podcast that deep dives into fascinating criminal cases that are solved, unsolved, or ongoing. From America's Lori Vallow to Germany's Armin Meiwes, we examine and discuss the world's most shocking cases. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to follow us online. Check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com and We Saw the Devil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, you can become part of the show by backing us on Patreon. Alrighty, so we are back with Brittany. She is joining us.
What's up?
We didn't scare her away the first time.
We didn't do a good enough job.
Nice.
Apparently not.
You have to try harder. You have to try way harder.
We'll never let you go.
Okay, now it's enough.
Yeah, you went too far.
Oh, man. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for coming back. And not only are you joining us for this episode, but as we stated in the previous episode, you're going to actually be joining us for the Lori Vallow series for a lot of episodes coming up. And we have a very big announcement to make. And so I would like you to kind of take the reins on this and tell everyone what we've been working on.
In Mormon speak, Robin, you are turning the time over to me right now. So thank you very much for your endearing words. So I thought it would be interesting. I feel like a lot of times the media might not be entirely fair to Mormons or to Lori, and a lot of things are just really general. But then you also hear a lot of feedback from people who have never even met a Mormon before, and their first experience is with Lori. And so I thought, what better way than to get in the actual mindset of someone who maybe hasn't heard of Mormons, but they've heard of Lori Vallow, and they're interfacing with Mormon missionaries. And so I'm going full Mormon Borat, and I have been talking with missionaries as an investigator and just asking basic questions of, if I were brand new to Mormonism, what would I learn? What would I be exposed to? What would I be taught? And just kind of trying to help other people understand things. I'm bringing up things that might be a little complex for the average, first timer with Mormonism. So I've brought up already in my conversations with them, we've already talked about Laban getting his head cut off. And how does that sit with a person that might be brand new, and how do missionaries help explain how that works, why it's okay, why it's not okay. It's really fascinating to basically take a backseat to my own upbringing as a Mormon and ask questions as someone who's brand new to it and hear right from the source, how are things being taught these days right now to people who are brand new? And I think that's going to be really fun for anyone to listen in. If you've ever had questions for a missionary, you can kind of do it through me. So what I think is going to be really fun is, if you are a patron, you get to feed me things that you want me to ask. I will work it into the conversation. I've already done quite a few. Jackie and Robin have been very creative with their questions so far. If you have questions for a missionary and you want to hear what would be taught, and you're a patron, and if you're not a patron, be one. Don't be silly. Send those, I guess, through the Patreon group. Is that what we're doing?
Yes. If you would like to take part in this, and this is very interactive and we're really excited about it, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/We Saw the Devil. And you can join for as little as $3 a month. And then, yes, you can submit questions.
A cup of coffee.
And you can...
$3.
You can submit questions directly to Brittany to ask.
She was going to call me Mormon Borat, guys. I bet you she was going to call me Mormon Borat.
And what I think is so fascinating about this is that, at least my experience in a lot of online Lori Vallow groups, is you have two camps primarily. You have those who are, like myself, for the most part, who are completely ignorant to Mormonism, any tenets, like belief systems, anything like that. And then you have those that are very defensive of it, right? Who are very religious and spiritual and are very defensive of those who are attacking it. So I find that there are just two very stark, polar opposite camps. And this is, I think, going to be really fascinating for everyone. So yeah, check us out on Patreon so you can submit your questions directly. But I really believe that this is going to be an amazing experience for, regardless of which camp you're in or how you feel about Mormonism as a whole or how you feel about the case, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. And full disclosure for anyone that kind of like Robin brought up, if you're in one of those two camps, please keep in mind that what I'm doing is really investigative. I'm not taking sides, and you'll never find me taking sides in either camp in anything I do. I'm going to do my best to stay as neutral as possible while still bringing my background as a Mormon into this, but in a way that also kind of helps both sides feel validated. So I'm not taking sides. This is an entirely neutral situation.
I have to say I really appreciate that. That is a very unique perspective that a lot of people don't do. It's actually one of those things of where when you hear about like anything LDS or anything that has to do with Lori Vallow, you have you were saying, two polar opposites. You have people who are like, well, screw that. And then you have other people who are like, well, no, screw you because you're saying screw that to me. So it's going to be really great. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, yeah.
So today's episode is going to be a look at the news. It's very rare these days that we have an action-packed week of anything, really, I guess. Everything, it's been quiet. There have been tumbleweeds blowing, and it's been very, very quiet. But this week,
so quiet.
It has been. But this week, we got some filings. We had some filings in motion. So we're just going to go over those really quickly. And then, especially with the Chad Daybell filing on November 30th, and also the follow-up to it on the 3rd, we're going to break that down. There's a lot to unpack there.
Well, and it's a big update too, right? Because I remember feeling like at one point in my mind, we weren't going to be able to really look forward to anything until like early-ish next year. Maybe even, it was, okay, I was going to say like June or July, but like these big changes that they've announced completely changed the timeline on everything at this point.
It did. And honestly, especially the Chad Daybell filing it was almost shocking to me what they included, and we'll get into all of that. First, let's just talk about Lori Vallow. So on December 4th, Mark Means filed a motion for transfer of trial, also including a motion to dismiss the charges. So Lori Vallow will be having a hearing on January 6th to discuss these items. I would say, honestly, I don't know if you agree with me, but I believe it's safe to say that these charges will not be dismissed.
More than likely not.
Lori's hearing will be on January 6th. Now, on November 30th, John Pryor, Chad Daybell's attorney, motioned to dismiss the charges and also change the venue as well. But he actually filed a memorandum on December 3rd to support that filing on November 30th. And this is what was so shocking to me. In this filing, he offers his reasons for requesting the change of venue and states that the Boise area or Western Idaho would likely provide a better chance at finding an impartial jury. We've discussed that before. It's the population center of Idaho for the most part, so that's not really a big surprise there. However, he also brought up a few, to me at least, pretty shocking points, including Tammy Daybell's autopsy. The audio taken from the House meeting where Lori admitted that she wanted to kill Joseph Ryan. We covered that very in-depth in a 3-part series, courtesy of Brittany here.
Wow, yes, we did.
And also, Chad Daybell's sister-in-law, if you recall, Heather Daybell, when she wrote the letter to her stake.
Which is also very interesting.
Yeah, and then Pryor also mentioned and name-dropped East Idaho News, local law enforcement, as well as mentioned the memorial to J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan that was more or less made kind of on the fencing and in the front of Chad Daybell's property. So he just dropped so much information into this memorandum as far as why he's wanting to change the venue from where it's currently set to be. This hearing is also going to take place on January 6th. Now, what's also interesting is that and Brittany, I believe you spoke to that too, is that Lori Vallow, Mark Means was almost like, yes, too.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at the dates, right? Like, so John Pryor, who, again, I still think he's incredible. I know a lot of people disagree, but I still think he's a great attorney. He files this, and then it was Mark Means. It was several days later that Mark Means was like, oh, yeah, my client. Us too. Like, it wasn't even the next day. They work in the same office. I don't know.
In your opinion, if you had to guess, how much communication do you think the two of them have with each other? I mean, constant at this point, I would assume, but...
I would hope so. I feel like John Pryor's the person that probably takes the time to do, like, you know, like he seems like the type that definitely uses everything OneDrive, like Microsoft everything. Mm-hmm. And then Mark Means seems like someone who's like borrowing his kid's Chromebook occasionally.
But kind of very different, like, personalities.
Different speeds. Yeah. Like, I get this, like, refined vibe from Pryor. He knows what he's doing. This is so smart. Like, say what you want, but this is the smartest thing he could do for his client, right? And then, like, Mark Means, his biggest complaint so far that I actually agree with was the letter from the LDS Church to its members. And that's the one where I'm like, oh, okay, Mark Means actually made good points here. But so far, that's been the only time I've been impressed with him.
Let's go over this memorandum. It starts out, and Pryor mentions that the right to a fair trial and to an impartial jury is guaranteed by the 6th and 14th Amendments, as well as by both the U.S. and Idaho constitutions. Okay. And
that's important, you know, because we've discussed before about tainting of the jury pool. And when you have a small town talk, and a big case, it can kind of mess things up.
And he also wants the court to consider pretrial publicity. So, as everyone knows, unless you've been living under a rock, this is a circus. It's a media storm. I remember when back in January, before this case was even on our actual radar, there were ads on Huffington Post, paid-for ads missing. And that's actually how I saw and discovered this case. I was on Huffington Post reading a random article, and there in the corner was a paid ad missing JJ and Tylee. It wasn't even connected to an article. It was an actual ad.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I mean, the publicity. And then if you are in True Crime Underground, Christmas Misery, there are people all over the world who are following this case very, very closely. But Brittany, you're in Idaho.
Mm-hmm. I live currently on the west side of the state. So, I mean, in theory, if the trial does get moved to the Boise area, it's going to be really close to where I'm at. But I've also I lived in Idaho Falls for a long time too. You know, I also went to BYUI, so I'm very familiar with like the Rexburg area, with East Idaho, and the reach that East Idaho News has as well. I get why they want to move it. It makes sense.
Do you find that Boise is large enough to keep that from happening? Or, you know, not a lot, I assume, happens in Idaho. You know, it's not New York, it's not Florida, California. So
look, potatoes sprout every year. That's a pretty big deal.
Those potato jokes, we will never, it's that and skinheads. We really, like, I really hope we just kind of ride the potato train a little harder. If we can get rid of neo-Nazis, we'll be okay. But
just be a good spot.
Exactly. So I guess, I mean, the thing that John Pryor has against him here, I mean, on top of like everything, but like the biggest issue he's going to face with an impartial jury is that Mormons, we are our very own small town, if you will. You can be in a big city, but you have your own little tight-knit group within your Mormon community. Your neighbors who are Mormon, you're seeing regularly. You see them every week at church. And so does he have less of a chance here of getting an impartial jury just because of the sheer population difference? Yeah, this is still a very populated place for Mormons. We have a temple here. You're going to find a lot of Mormons here. Not as many as East Idaho, but you'll still have a good population here.
Boise in itself is not very large by any stretch of the imagination either.
It's big for Idaho.
Oh, I'm not trying to put you Idahoans down or nothing, but I'm just saying it's a little small for a city.
Yeah, it is. For a capital, even. Yeah, it is. It's like very small. And again, you're still looking at these tighter knit communities of Mormons within it. So he'll have an easier time getting a not as impartial jury, but I mean, I can't imagine there's very many people that haven't heard of the case even here.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And actually, in a future episode, we are going to be covering jury selection, too. There are very, very cool techniques and ways of how attorneys, when they pick jurors, like different tests and questions that they give them. So the O.J. Simpson trial was notorious for the way that they went through the jury selection process. So we're going to be going over a couple of those and maybe discuss what could happen with the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell trial.
Other than
jury
being
selection.
selected for jury duty and hating it, you can actually hear why you hate it. I'm just kidding.
I've always wanted to be selected for jury duty.
Me too.
Like, it's never happened. I've never had it happen. It's like high school all over again, guys.
Oh my gosh.
No one wants me.
I've had it happen, but I wasn't selected technically. I was summoned for jury duty, but they didn't select me.
I would love to go. Be sequestered.
For this case or for, like, any case? Because this case would be obviously amazing.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Let's just go over the memorandum and read some just key pieces. So one is, again, this is via John Pryor, quote, "The small population of residents within the 7th Judicial District makes it impossible to obtain a fair and impartial jury within the 7th District because the local media, religious organizations, pictures, ribbons on state property contribute to the unfair bias." Where you are, Brittany, have you seen any of the Where Are the Children ribbons, anything like that?
We had a vigil here, I think. So at the Capitol, it was basically that same night that they did one in Idaho Falls. There was one here in Boise,
There
too.
was.
I think they've actually had things like that in other states, right? Didn't they do one in Arizona? Like, the school that JJ
I believe
went
so.
to, they did something
Yeah,
too.
they did. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's far-reaching. I wonder what his aim is at for, like, the vigils and, like, the memorials that they've put up. I don't understand. I'm not trying to be insensitive here, but, like, when you're driving, you see memorials all the time from, like, accidents that have happened and things like that. That one kind of seemed like he was, like, grasping at straws a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but that was one of his claims. I was like, I don't know if that's really much of an issue.
Yeah, I don't see it. Do you, Jackie?
No, and I think that in society we're bombarded by a lot of imagery all the time, and we kind of filter a lot out. So I don't think it's extremely relevant.
Yeah. It's super sad that in a way we are kind of immune to those memorials you see on, like, sides of roads and things like that.
I actually look at them.
I mean,
I actually, like, stare at them.
You do?
I actually note what they put at the little gravesite and stuff, and I always wonder how they died.
do you, like, so if you had seen something like that with JJ and Tylee, would you have, like, taken the time to, like, read it and stuff? Or would you just be like, oh, I wonder what happened? And, like, because I'll be real, like, I would drive by.
I would have a thought, and it would be in my head probably for a good, like, 10 minutes, and then I would let it go. I wouldn't look it up.
Huh. Well, there you go, guys. Good people.
Hey, it's the truth.
There's...
I'd be like, wow, I wonder what happened. Like, I'd have this internal conversation that would take place, and then I would just be like, is it worth me looking up? I don't think I would even ask that.
I would probably just be like, gosh, I freaking missed the turn of Chick-fil-A again.
Alrighty, so the next section is actually the most bizarre to me, and we're just going to read this paragraph. I was floored when I read this. So, John Pryor said, to support this assertion regarding inadmissible and inflammatory evidence, there has been an overwhelming amount of local reporting related to Mrs. Vallow's activities in Arizona prior to any relationship with Mr. Daybell. Articles and audio recordings of Miss Vallow insinuating her right to cause harm to her third husband, a video recording of a material witness expressing her view on the case. Additional inflammatory and untruthful information that has been reported by the local media insinuates that Mr. Daybell had some role in his wife Tammy Daybell's death. The prosecutor continues to allow this inaccurate information to continue by not providing the autopsy results performed on Tammy Daybell, despite it having been performed a significant time ago. The advancement of this narrative in a small population area only continues to taint the potential jury pool. That was a lot to unpack in one paragraph. We're bringing up Lori Vallow, already, like, separating Chad from Lori again. Lori Vallow insinuating her right to cause harm to Joseph Ryan. And then we mentioned Tammy Daybell's death and the autopsy. My question, my very one question that I had when I read this is, why is John Pryor bringing up Tammy Daybell's death unless he knows what the results of that autopsy were?
It's interesting, right? So, like, I mean, there's all these rumors floating around of what could have been that pink foam, right? Wasn't that the thing that everyone was talking about, the pink foam coming out of Tammy's mouth? Obviously, that had to have been something that was tested. If I'm on the prosecuting team, I don't know, like, I feel like I would announce if I had found something there, but then at the same time, maybe it's good not to show all your cards. I don't know.
I would say that someone who is an attorney or has experience with something like this would have a better, well-rounded opinion on that, maybe. I personally don't know, but what I do know is that it could have a numerous amount of different factors that play into it, and that is to be foreseen if we're going to actually find out. Or if they're going to find out.
It's so bizarre because I feel like most other criminal cases, you get autopsy results back pretty quickly.
Well, look at Alex's, right? Like, we got his pretty dang quick. Well, I mean, it did take a little while, but nothing like what Tammy's. I mean, she's been gone for over a year now.
They exhumed her body to extract this, right? To do the toxicology reports. So it's understandable that something like this may take a little more of a copious amount of time rather than something that is fresh.
But they've confirmed that it's been completed for a couple months now, like months. I hate to say it, but, the children, in particular, Tylee, I can understand if that particular kind of autopsy would remain private due to the sensitive nature and emotional nature of it. But Tammy Daybell, I'm not really quite understanding why we haven't. Maybe because Idaho is so small and, as far as tainting the jury pool, I don't know, but it's really bizarre. And I was researching other criminal cases, and this is actually fairly unique. A large case like this, having the autopsy, a major autopsy withheld this long is actually fairly unique.
Well, the whole approach to this entire trial has been fairly unique. The preliminary hearing, as I've illustrated before in previous episodes, is that it was almost like a mini trial. They had so many witnesses that they brought forward, and that's unusual for a preliminary hearing. So
that list was long, too. Like, the number of witnesses that they even plan on calling. They could have called anyone at that pre-trial, too. We are going to have, I think, by definition, an absolute shit show to see when things come around.
Oh, man, I cannot wait. This is going to be the popcorn trial of the century. Move over OJ.
Yes.
Move over Casey Anthony. Move over Jodi Arias. I think that the Lori Vallow trial is going to take the cake.
I'm taking time off work. Like, I'm using vacation time, guys.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not kidding you.
Okay, and then the next piece, Jon Pryor almost picks on the prosecutor, Rob Wood, and he says, quote, "The prosecution through the county has employed a public relations firm to handle all media requests and comments directed to them. Information to defense counsel suggests they are trying to advance their own narrative of the case." I actually really love Rob Wood. I think he's done an incredible job so far, and I feel like he's been very, very, very neutral, and he's not flashy like, say, a Jose Baez.
I like playing devil's advocate here. Hey, like, we saw the devil's advocate.
You did a real good funny.
Thanks.
A knee stopper.
But, like, for real, like, I kind of want to side with him here a little bit. And the main reason is because if the prosecution was interviewing people to basically disprove the defense in saying that this jury pool is tainted, we can't use them, is it that wrong for the prosecution to then also hire someone to do the exact same thing the defense did? I guess I'm defending Rob Wood. Never mind. I'm not being a devil's advocate right now.
I feel like Rob Wood did do the polling, right? I know that he did hire the firm and they did the polling based on and asked them a series of questions. But it was my understanding that Rob Wood agreed to the change of venue entirely. He was like, yeah, we have no problem with this. So why is Jon Pryor mad?
I don't know.
That's his job.
Maybe he just likes like having like a good solid number of issues, right? To kind of like back up his overarching thing of, I have to move this trial. It can't be here in East Idaho. So come up with a list of all of my reasons. Some of them I'm just like throwing something and seeing what sticks. But the main overarching thing is, please, oh my God, let me move this trial. It can't be close to Rexburg.
And that is followed up in his next line. The communities in Fremont, Madison, and Bonneville counties are predominantly LDS communities, although religion in no way disqualifies anyone to serve in any case. At direction of the state president in Henry's Fork, Mr. Daybell's sister sent a mass email to all the ladies within the Henry Fork stake, only causing greater concern that any potential jury pool would be tainted. This happened several months ago, and if you guys recall, Chad Daybell's sister-in-law, Heather Daybell, wrote a letter to her stake.
Yeah. a doozy of one.
It was a doozy. And this is going to be a two-part question for you, Brittany, is because, again, I feel like Jackie and I are kind of sitting on the outside, right? Not getting a lot of this subtlety and nuance or even blatant in your face Mormonism and lingo. So what did that letter mean?
So just like a quick summary, just for anyone who hasn't read it, it was basically a letter that Heather Daybell, Chad's sister-in-law, wrote. And she is the Relief Society president. So basically, like, in a massive geographic area, she's probably like the president of all the women's organizations. So that's probably the better way to explain that. She wrote this letter that was basically like, look, I know you guys have been hearing some things, but here's where I stand. And so, if anything, it was her just restating that she's still faithful. Like, she's still a faithful member of the church. Her overarching thing that she was trying to tell people, driving distance between her and the people she shares a name with.
And what's interesting is that, you know, when we're looking in on something like this, most people wouldn't know what's going on. Most people don't understand the inner workings of how LDS does, like, these internal memos and stuff like that. And, like, why would someone forward something? Does that matter?
Well, I actually am kind of curious too. Like, I mean, let's represent the other side of the camp really quick. From an outsider looking in, what does this look like to you?
It feels like an odd email, right? Some weird structure of a religion, and they want to forward some email trying to send a message across about something in particular. Mm-hmm. And to me, when I see it, I'm like, I don't know what this lecture is. Like, it takes research, right? When I hear about this lecture at BYU that they mentioned,
I see. So your overarching takeaway is like, this is really confusing. You don't see a thesis here for her or anything like that when you're reading through it.
How strikingly relevant something like this could be within their own community. Like, because when you're not in the community, you have no idea. LDS has a lot of almost like its own language, so to speak.
Yeah. 100%. It's its own culture. We have our own cookbooks, dude. Like, yeah, we definitely have everything unique, almost as its own little civilization in a way. So yeah, it's interesting, again, seeing that outsider's perspective too.
I have to agree with Jackie on this. I feel like the LDS letter, like the memo that they sent to the higher ups in the organization, the controversial one where they told the church policy reminder, immediately I was like, sirens, there were enough red flags there. It was like Soviet Russia.
Russia.
I was like, there's something not coincidental about the release of this memo. And then with the Heather Daybell letter, I could not be more clueless.
So one thing I just wanted to point out too. So the church sent out I know this isn't the correct terminology, but the church sent out their reminder about the standing no snitching policy within the church. That got sent out on August 4th. This letter, or this email that Heather sent out and that got distributed, it looks like that was sent out on August 12th.
Wow.
And
close together.
Yes, and didn't the pretrial where Melanie Gibb took the stand, wasn't that on August 3rd?
Yes.
So we have a really tight timeline here where Melanie takes a stand. The church reminds people, like, guys, you're supposed to talk to our people first. And then this happens. So it's interesting because apparently this email, assuming that it started getting distributed before the things went out, it continued to get distributed even after the church maybe even tried to put a kibosh on it. This might have been one of the reasons that memo got sent out. It's hard to say for sure.
Sounds like an effort.
But the timelines are there.
Okay. So I think that one of the main things that I noticed when I'm reading over this letter, what is this talk that they're mentioning, this BYU talk?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was a talk given by Elder Lawrence Corbridge at BYU, and the title of the talk is called Stand Forever. And basically, now at the time, I feel like this article, or this devotional, was directed at people who maybe have like doubts about the church. Doubts meaning, is the Book of Mormon, like, is this a factually written document? And, is God real even? I mean, we could even get into kind of more of that existential crisis moment that a Mormon might face. And so this talk was actually directed at a younger group of people It obviously gets shared to all ages, but it was directed initially at a younger group of people who might have questions regarding how to know whether or not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the one true church. So it's interesting she was directed to read this talk. Like, and it wasn't even like, I don't even think she said directed. I think she said she was instructed to read this by her stake president.
Which is interesting. Very interesting word choice. It's almost like she's really being told rare to do it.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So it's really rare, too. So for anyone who's not sure, a stake president, that's like the highest position you can have within a geographic region that spreads a good, population size. So this is probably the highest level person you would interact with as a member of your church. And you really don't sit down with the stake president unless you're, 1, in trouble, 2, you're getting a high up calling, or 3, the every 2 years that you're renewing your temple recommend to go to the temple. So for her to have had a sit down meeting with a stake president, it shows the significance that this case and her relation to Chad, it was enough for her to have a sit down where like they needed to make sure like she was on the team. Like, you're good with us still, right? Like, you're not, where is your allegiance at this point? Is it to your family or is it to your church?
I want to direct us into one very relevant point that I did extract when I was reading it, is that they do talk about the warning of false prophets and gods, right? In reference. And and that to me is kind of highlighting, the relevance behind Chad Daybell and his interaction and how she kind of segues into, knowledge is power of God onto salvation. We're kind of cherry picking from this BYU lecture thing, and we're getting these. We have these general Bible references and scriptures and stuff that are just kind of like, they're common knowledge ones that probably everyone's sort of heard from like any of the testaments. I do believe that when we look at Chad Daybell and we're like warning of false prophets and gods, I mean, she basically talks about how he goes against the word of LDS in general.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's some fighting words that she puts in hers against Chad, right? I really think the end thesis, though, that she's trying to explain is, I'm not with him. My allegiance is to this church. She drops quote after quote after quote from this same talk, this devotional, reminding, anyone who's maybe questioned her or her standing in the church or where her family's at, she's reasserting from her own account, I'm in it. I struggle to grasp why me, why my family, why did it happen to these kids? But I don't question the church. I know that everything's going to work out because I have this. Now, this original talk, these kind of general statements of knowledge is revelation, knowledge is power, those are there. But this particular talk was actually really hard for people to hear at that time because there's kind of some gaslighting in there, if we're being really fair, right? Because I have to play both sides. So to be 100% fair, what this is basically telling people is like, hey, you can't listen to everything you hear about Mormons. You can't use process of elimination and decide from that the Book of Mormon's not real, that God's not real. That's not going to work that way because you're going to see too many negative things and you're just going to come away with the wrong opinion. You're not giving a fair shot. But then they use that same argument. They're like, also, the scientific method is a good way to find out if something's real or not. And you've got the analytical method, the academic method, and then you can pray about it. But the problem is that those methods don't really work if you're trying to prove or disprove something, if you're also saying that you have to trust and not research things either, right? Like, don't worry if you have doubts. Don't have doubts. But if you do have them, don't. And if you still have them, at least believe us. And
it's a very mixed message, really.
It's really mixed message. And if you're already struggling with how you feel about things, and I mean, my heart goes out to Heather. Like, this has got to be super confusing for her to be like, this is my brother-in-law. I mean, don't forget, like, this is family to her. Think about your own.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think it's worth mentioning, too, that she did apparently report Chad more or less to the family unit. I'm not sure the specifics on that, if it was their parents. I know that she spoke to the other brothers, but the family more or less shunned her for coming to them and expressing concern over Chad's beliefs and involvement in some of the groups that he was in. I'm assuming possibly, preparing a people, or she was more or less shunned for even showing concern.
And well, it put a strain on her relationship with him. And she actually talks about that, how she warned people within Chad and to the extended family and all that. And she just felt like she wasn't heard. And why didn't she go to the church is what I really think. I'm like, why didn't she go to the church if she really thought that, Chad had these fringe beliefs?
Well, you have to also remind yourself that she's married to Chad's brother. So as an outsider, I mean, if you put yourself in her position...
Is she going to get excommunicated?
I mean, it would destroy your marriage potentially, So pros and cons and risks,
But she was willing to go to extended family.
Well, that's family. That's, beyond the religious institution.
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind too that there's certain aspects of everything. So I really don't think Chad and his brother were in the same ward. I can't say for certain, but I don't think they lived near each other, right? Like they were...
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I'm not sure. I can't picture them living in the same ward for whatever reason. I've no reason to feel that way. But when you go to your bishop, you're talking to your bishop about your immediate family, the people in your home. You normally wouldn't talk to your bishop about things going on with your siblings and their stuff, because that's something that their bishop would be talking to them about. And so it's not that she maybe did anything wrong. It's that culturally, you wouldn't really have a need to report that to your own bishop, because they have theirs and you have yours.
So it'd be more immediate.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Charles Vallow, when he noticed that Lori was kind of going off the deep end, how he went to his bishop, like their bishop.
He went to his bishop, okay. Yeah. Yeah, the bishop is very much central to the people that the bishop sees every single Sunday.
What's interesting is that she says if she dwells on these things, it weakens her faith. What does that mean to us?
It's again, like my heart just like hurts reading this for her, because what I read when I read her letter is she sat down with her stake president, and whether the stake president called that meeting or she asked, I guarantee he called it, though. You don't usually escalate to a stake president that quickly. But I guarantee he called this meeting, and he basically told her what's going on. And she opened up and she said, how could my brother-in-law do this? There's dead kids. We listened to him. Like, he told us things and never shared anything that was that far off. I mean, if I think about it, maybe it was a little bit off. But at the time, yeah, pray for more answers and you get more light and knowledge from God. That's a pretty universal belief. The more faith you have, the more you receive, right?
Yeah.
She was blindsided. She sits down with the stake president, and the stake president is like, I hear doubts in what she's saying. And he says, you need to go and study this talk. You need to go study this sermon given that's basically like, you're not having doubts anymore. You're done with that.
Oh, wow.
You are a believer. You defend the faith. And here's an example of a couple people who denied the faith. Here's an example of Peter, who lied to Jesus' face about loving him 3 times. Like that. My heart hurts thinking about how deceived and how broken she felt and confused. And then now she has the most supreme leader in her local congregation telling her, you can't be doubting, honey. That's not what you're doing.
Wow.
In fact, I need you to reassert where you stand because of the calling you hold. You're the highest ranking female, essentially, in our area. I need you to set the record straight. I need you to reassert that despite these trials, despite the heartache, despite what you are feeling, and all that, your faith has not shaken, because we look to you. She's carrying a lot when you read through this.
That's crazy. That's so like authoritarian. I don't know. It's just, as someone outside, it's just so unbelievable.
It's a duty thing though too, right? So like, I mean, one of her main roles and one of the stake presidents is you gotta kind of be this shepherd in a way, right? Sense. And the role that she had, if she truly is that Stake Relief Society president, she might have even felt a duty to get ahead of everything and say, guys, like, I can get through this. I still believe this. I'm hurting. Thank you for your messages and your concern. I struggle figuring out what's going on, but I still have faith in this organization.
Honestly, that's even just a generic PR move.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
But in like a genuine way, not in like a, we have to save face here. Like, I actually read this as entirely genuine. I don't see anything in here that's like a strategic, oh, we've got to, you know, beat this before East Idaho News. Like, I really think this was, I think it was probably two people that thought, you know what, it kind of falls on us to take care of this.
I found it to be very emotionally aligned with what is actually relevant and what has happened. And I find it to be very interesting to have these tidbits and kind of like a cultural insight into the side that I don't understand, you know, like the inner workings of, it's almost like they have their own chain of command.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a chain of command that's there. There's one thing that you can look at from the Mormon Church and respect, and that is organization. The way that they have organized every single aspect of how things work, how things flow, processes, procedures. I don't know that I've seen a more organized religion.
And then John Pryor mentions that there is, quote, there is information regarding her connections through marriage to law enforcement. There was a lot of concern, especially around the time after the kids were found. In particular, when it became public knowledge that the text message surrounding the raccoon, for some reason, in a lot of Facebook groups that I'm in, they said that Heather Daybell is related to law enforcement. Do you know who that person is?
I don't.
But that became a big deal. People wondering on both sides, yet again, wondering, who is this person? And apparently they were actually on the investigation team there locally.
They had to get them kind of like, they had to point them out too. They made a motion to point out that they were and have them set aside, right?
Yeah. But John Pryor says, quote, I have great concern that local law enforcement in this case are speaking or have spoken to people in the community about facts of this case. Which, that's a very, very, very large accusation to make, that local law enforcement has been out there talking and running their mouths. However, I would believe that to be true. Because I know for a fact that some pieces of this case were leaked, at least online, before they became absolute public knowledge.
Well, and don't forget, too, that Nate Eaton regularly referred to things ahead of time, right? Like, the leads that he was getting, in fact, I think in his very first interview with Keith Morrison, he said something along the lines of, I had a friend in law enforcement called me and said, think bigger, right? This is the biggest thing you've ever seen, but think bigger. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe they're friends or something, or who this person is, but yeah, there's definitely a precedent that we can look at even other people who were talking with media. Yeah, that's a valid point, actually. Again, I think Pryor's smart. I think this is a totally fair point for him to be making.
Completely agree. I mean, I've seen it happen even just on online Facebook and Reddit communities, how things were put into public view that should not have been. So 100% fair. And then he discusses a survey. He says, quote, the survey presented to the court, performed by defense counsel and provided as an exhibit, supports the assertion that a fair trial cannot be had in the 7th Judicial District. It shows that not only was the person conducting the survey presented with threats from Bonneville, Madison, and Fremont counties, that the vast majority of people interviewed stated that they have already made up their mind regarding the guilt of the defendants. Further, that the vast majority would not change their mind.
Which is not good. And
not surprising.
Yeah, not surprising.
And then, Brittany, to your point, East Idaho News is named personally.
Yeah.
John Pryor's not a fan.
Well, no, and for good reason. I mean, a couple of big things happened that East Idaho News was part of, right? They broke the case. They were there at the very start. They saw it through. They're going to be there all the way to the end. This is their baby at this point. Everything blew up because of Nate Eaton and his team. And the reach that they have, I actually feel like John Pryor is being really fair right here, because East Idaho News has a much bigger reach than just East Idaho. I mean, they're probably the second most reliable news source in Idaho next to the Statesman. Wow. So their news, it crosses everywhere. They're a pretty robust little team. They're small, but they have an incredible reach. And a lot of that reach has just been done organically too. I don't know that John Pryor is entirely fair in saying that this is because of East Idaho News. If they wouldn't have shared X, Y, and Z, someone else like Justin Lum probably would have been right there later on, just not as early as December. Or actually, I think it might have been November when Nate Eaton started sharing things.
I feel like he and Justin Lum, and I love the fact that there is a friendship that's formed between the two of them. Yeah. I love it. It's so endearing, the bromance that's happened, because I feel like Nate Eaton does great interviews, but Justin Lum is on it with the court filings and immediate news. So I feel like together they have really put this case really into the public view and the reach that it has.
Well, yeah, and the access that each of them have to the closer ties to the case. I mean, there's something to be said that Nate Eaton can jump in a helicopter at a moment's notice and be like, we're flying over wherever the FBI is going. But then Justin Lum can go through everything in Arizona and really get down into stuff there. Like, would we have as much information about Joseph Ryan if he had been pushing as hard there?
Media is so important when it comes to transparency on a lot of levels. Investigative journalism is so amazing.
Without the media, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the information for there to actually even have had a case get created. Like this, I get why John Pryor's concerned about, okay, the reach these people have has tainted the jury pool, but it also made it so that we actually were able to figure out what happened to these kids. Even the FBI was in the media asking people to spread the word and get the message out there. Like, we need pictures from Yellowstone around this time period. So it's like, if the federal government's allowed to utilize the public and share the message, why was it wrong for the local authorities to do the same?
Absolutely. And I feel like there wouldn't be an ongoing active case into the shooting of Charles Vallow if, this hadn't, if it hadn't been for Nate Eaton and Justin Lum really putting this into the thoughts of the public. So it's very important, but I do agree. John Pryor is doing his job, and this is very fair of him, I feel.
I feel that way, too.
And then he mentions, quote, photos of courthouses laced with ribbons and pictures. I've also submitted numerous photos of businesses and places within the 7th Judicial District community expressing opinion on this case. And I find that to be also very fair because if you recall, before the children were found, even the local, Albertsons, the grocery store, cupcakes, they were even making cookies and cupcakes, selling them out of their store. Where are the children? So, it was very far reaching and very public.
It really impacted the community on a tremendous level. And when we were there in Rexburg, you could actually see it across the face of a lot of people. When we would talk about the case, that it was more like the devastation was real.
Yeah. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think this is going to be one of those cases that actually stays really heavy with the community for years to come.
So tying up this particular document, and I'm very excited, again, I said earlier in this episode that we are going to cover the trial, the logistics and structure of the trial, starting with the jury selection. So at the very end of this memorandum, John Pryor discusses what he's kind of looking for with jury selection. And he says, quote, "We would request the court juror questionnaire should ask if the panel member have been exposed to any pretrial publicity. After the nature of the case is explained to the panel in person, it should follow up on its written question to see if any other panel members now realize their exposure to pretrial publicity. All the panel members who have been so exposed should then be questioned." So he's already kind of setting up his steps and requirements for the jury selection, asking them questions, and then maybe that potential juror would realize that they had been exposed to pretrial publicity. So I think it's going to be very, very, very interesting, the stipulations and questions, especially John Pryor, that he puts forth for that jury selection. I look forward to covering that in a future episode of how all of this is going to unfold.
I have so many questions. Yeah, like what does that even look? I am so excited for that episode because I am crazy ignorant on the whole process.
I don't blame him. I feel bad. I actually kind of feel bad for him. I feel like he as a defense attorney is in a real shit spot because he has Chad Daybell, 2 children were found on his property. But then he also has a parasite called Lori Vallow that now with the release of that audio, where she literally in living color in living audio, is literally talking about how she wanted to kill her ex-husband.
Well, this is the case of like dumb criminals being dumb criminals. They thought they had it covered up and then a raccoon ruins everything. And and it was just like, what's so interesting about it is that we have this guy who's kind of a crappy person as a defense attorney, but as a defense attorney, he's actually relatively decent. He's trying to do his job, and then we see him trying to get the case dismissed, right? And we think about it and we're like, oh, that's not likely. Why are you even doing that? That's crazy. But it's normal, and it's so hard for us from when you look in and you don't know the due process to be like, what's normal, what's not.
Well, that's why we covered it before, too, is, you see all these people discussing it online, Facebook or Reddit or whatever. This is so stupid. Well, then Chad could come back with an appeal later down the road and say, my attorney did not properly represent me. So, it's also for self-preservation as well, in the best interest of his client, too. So it all makes sense, guys. It all makes sense why all of this is happening. As far as the date of the trial, I assume that a new date will be assigned after the change of venue is completed. If you recall last time how they had to wait on the judge to look at his calendar, like in the middle of that hearing, that morning hearing. Yes. So hopefully we'll have a repeat of that. He will choose a nice date, hopefully sooner than July. Hopefully it snaps back and we get a trial sooner rather than later. But we do not know the date yet.
We don't know the venue location yet even.
Yeah. I say it's safe to say my money would be on Boise.
Ada County would be my bet as well. But I think he specifically mentions Meridian and Caldwell, which you're talking, again, like a 10-minute drive outside of that as well. You're also looking at a very close proximity to where both Mark Means and John Pryor work. So less commute time.
We know that is very important to Mark Means.
Yes. He seems like a guy that's worried about the environment and his impact on it.
So that's it for this episode, guys. Brittany, as always, thank you. We look so forward to having you on in future episodes.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'll be on anytime.
And don't forget, we have our new series starring Brittany as she is a Mormon Borat.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited. If you are a patron, please send in the questions. Give me some tricky ones. I'll work it into the conversation and see if we can get some inside information as to what a brand new interested party might hear when they're learning about the church. And if you're not a patron already, $3, right? A month? $3.
For as little as $3 a month. And we have a lot of different tiers, different benefits, and you can choose which ones you'd be interested in. Thank you for joining us.
Until next crime.